gives me great honor and it is a privilege to introduce our guest speaker for tonight. He is Reverend Dr. Geoffrey Cummins. Without going too much further into his background, which is quite unfair of me, may I just highlight a few pieces of relevant information. Mr. Cummins first came to Tonga in 1966, 100 years after Moulton started Tupou College, and worked in Tonga until 1973 as the principal of the only senior high school of the church at that time. It was Tupou High School. May I also add that in that particular year, 1966, Mr. Cummins' first year at Tupou High School, it was the first time that a Tongan student from Tonga passed directly matriculation exam or university entrance exam from Tonga, from a school in Tonga to an overseas university. And that was through Mesri Safi, former old boy of Tupou College. Now, after his 2 terms in Tonga, 1973, he went back to study at the Australian National University in Canberra, where he gained a Master of Arts. His thesis was on school and society in Tonga, 1826 to 1855. In the years 1975 to 1977, he was a consultant with the Commonwealth Education. In 1981, he gained his Doctor of Philosophy from the Australian National University. His thesis was on a biography of the Reverend Dr. James Moulton. Between 1985 and 1992, Reverend Dr. Cummins was General Secretary of the United Church Board of Education. He has a wide range of publications with several articles in the Journal of Pacific History. He contributed a chapter in Noel Rutherford's Friendly Islands, History of Tonga, and also made contributions to Ian Campbell's Polynesian Paradox essays. One of his latest works was a co-authoring the Tupou College Sesquicentenary History book. At the age of 80, Reverend Dr. Cummins and his wife Anne are still very much active in research work, especially in matters related to Tonga and its rich history. With his wealth of experience and expertise in the chosen theme for tonight, I am delighted to invite Reverend Dr. Geoffrey Cummins to deliver this inaugural annual history lecture on the influence of genius, Reverend Dr. James Egan Moulton, Tupou College, and the dawn of a new era. Can we please welcome Dr. Geoffrey Cummins.
I wish to acknowledge the words of respect and honour that were offered to King Tupou VI and Her Majesty Queen Nanasipau'u, and to the other honoured guests who are with us. It's a nice. I count it a privilege to have been asked to give this inaugural lecture this evening. When James Egan Moulton was appointed to what was called Tonga's Native Training Institute in 1866, a whole new approach to teaching and learning began. And from the earliest days of its existence, Tupou College and Moulton, its first principal, the former headmaster from Newington in Sydney, created a good deal of interest and discussion. Some missionary fellow workers were sceptical. They had never seen anything like it before in Tonga, and they wondered whether it was appropriate or necessary. Moulton was working at a level that was, in many cases, beyond some of his own missionary colleagues. Overseas observers and commentators also had reservations. It seemed unbelievable. The syllabus was something that other mission areas such as Fiji and Samoa had never previously seen or heard of, and were certainly not planning to introduce. Moulton's view was that the work in mathematics, for example, had allowed him to what he called to test the capacity of the Tongan mind. His Tongan students, he believed, were worthy of and capable of receiving the best that he could offer, and the best that was being offered at Newington in Sydney and Kingswood in England. The graduation class of 1869, Moulton's first, was to examine students in Euclid, books 1 and 2, algebra to simple equations, arithmetic, fractions, vulgar and decimal, mensuration, surfaces and solids, the history of ancient monarchies, Egypt and Assyria and Babylon, with outlines of the history of England and France, religious knowledge, the life of Christ, and the history of the Hebrew monarchy. It was that kind of syllabus, this seemingly impossible task, that prompted scepticism, encouraged criticism, and called for investigation and verification. And so it was that a deputation from the Wesleyan Church in Sydney, consisting of Stephen Raybone, who'd been a missionary here from 1836 to 1850, and James Watkin, who'd been here from 1831 to 1837, two men who were fluent in the Tongan language, were to arrive in June 1869. The examination was important, and Moulton saw it, to quote, as the first stage in the history of Tupou College. The deputation members were astonished at what they saw and heard at the college. In a long and exacting examination in the presence of the King and Queen, the chiefs and people, missionaries, European settlers, the collegians did wonderfully well in all things examined. The program was a truly amazing affair. Euclid, physics, astronomy, drilling and marching, with a fine salute of honour to the King, land measurements with theodolite and chains, chemistry experiments defining atoms and decomposing water, Mozart's Gloria, and numerous other musical items entertained the spectators, and Moulton's version of the hymn, the one we sang at the beginning, Never, Never Give Up, Oh What Love You, caught the attention of the delegation. The examination concluded with the students reciting in Tongan some verses from Homer's Iliad. This, thought Rayburn and Watkin, was the climax. The deputation's final remarks paid a glowing tribute to the methods applied at Tupou College, to the amazing proficiency of the students, and the skill and the ability of their teacher. Was there ever such a college master before as now in Tonga, they said. A cyclopedia of accomplishments. They quoted one of the onlookers at the examination, who remarked that it was nothing short of the influence of genius. The influence of genius. When Moulton and his family paid a visit to England in 1890, they took Johnny Fakau, honour-board student, 1876, with them. At a Cambridge meeting, Fakau was asked to speak. He used an illustration from astronomy to refer to the relationship of Tupou College to the Cambridge and other great English colleges. He invited the audience to look at the sky and take a lesson from it. Constellations, brilliant stars, galaxies, and the hazy cloud of light were some of the words and the images that he used. And we will come back to that speech later. I have heard the relationship of Moulton and his students described in similar terms. I was asked to look at the sky and take a lesson from it. Moulton and his students, I was told, were like a bright moon with a number of satellites orbiting around it. We will spend a little time looking at that moon and its satellites as we explore the influence of genius. The origins of higher education, the words of a prophet and the sermon of a king. We can trace the specific origins of Tupou College to the words of a prophet and the sermon of Tupou I. The biblical prophet said, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." The Old Testament, Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. The Tongan king chose those words for a sermon that is still fondly remembered today. The sermon was preached in Fiji as King George Tauwha'ahau Tupou was on a voyage to Sydney in 1853. He was on board the mission ship John Wesley. And the prophet's words allowed the king to speak about his vision, something that weighed heavily upon his mind. Central to his sermon, and we have a translation of it because two missionaries were travelling with him. And this is the translation of part of that sermon. Tawha'ahau said, "Ignorance or the lack of knowledge destroys man. It destroys his excellency, his happiness, his usefulness, his soul. He perishes for the want of knowledge. See what knowledge has done for the white man. See what ignorance has done for the men of this land. Is it that white men are born more wise? Is it that they are naturally more capable than others? No. But they have obtained knowledge. And that knowledge comes from the book. This is the principal cause of the difference. What kingdom, he concluded, was ever wise without reading? And then quoting the biblical King Solomon, he concluded the sermon, "Put away folly and you shall live." In the years that followed, the king would return more than once to the theme of seeking opportunities to advance the education of his people. This was the genius of Tupou I. It was the king's considered opinion that the mind of Europeans and the mind of Tongans differed in only one aspect. Europeans had greater opportunities for learning than Tongans. This was a belief shared a decade later by Moulton as he began his challenging regime at what was to become known as Tupou College. King George made the most of his time in Sydney in 1853, examining public works, visiting an iron foundry and gas works, having an audience with the Governor-General, taking part in numerous church meetings, including gatherings of Sunday school children, all of which meant that he became, quote, informed on many subjects. On one occasion, he was a guest at a church gathering where 2,000 people gathered in the open air. And when he spoke to the huge crowd, Stephen Rayburn, the former missionary, was his translator. And the crowd was deeply impressed by his appearance and his preaching. And on that occasion, he chose as his text some words from St. Peter's Day of Pentecost sermon, when he said of Jesus, "He went everywhere doing good." When he left Sydney to return to Tonga, a special farewell service was held at which an impressive written address was presented to the King by Sydney Wesleyans, praising him for his commitment to doing his best to, quote, improve the temporal circumstances of your people. In his reply, he spoke of his deep joy and appreciation of his time in Sydney and of the, quote, great things that he had seen. He then made a remark that drew loud cheers from the congregation. He said this: "If a very gracious and good thing came to the mind of a man or a woman, is it not a matter of surprise that his mind should literally dance and his mouth laugh?" Very early in the history of the Wesleyan mission here in Tonga, Taupa'ahau could see the importance of education. In 1829, when he was just 32 years of age, his hunger for learning was evident when he came to Nuku'alofa to see the school there, and as a result, he requested a missionary to come to Appointing to teach him and his people. The missionary could not go immediately, but Peter V, who had learned some basic reading and writing skills, was sent to prepare the way. V had been, quote, a teacher of the language to pioneer missionaries John Thomas and Nathaniel Turner. And armed with some alphabet cards, some handwritten books, some pens and paper, he began teaching Taupa'ahau and his people. V was soon able to report to Thomas that Taupa'ahau was devoting his time, quote, studying day and night in order to master the amazing new skills of reading and writing. To begin with, according to Nathaniel Turner, he did not know a single written character of the language, but within less than 10 weeks he was able to send a letter of appreciation to the missionaries at Tupou, written by his own hand. And the Reverend James Watkin was delighted that the King was equally attentive, if not increasingly so, to the things of God, and had volunteered his services as a teacher. You have on the screen an early letter of Toloa I. I'll just read you a few words. And this is from someone that, a decade earlier was just learning to read and write. He addressed it to Mr. Tucker, who'd been a special teacher of his, and to Mrs. Tucker. To Mr. Tucker, my dear friend in the Lord Jesus, I received your letter to me and am grateful. And your letter said that I had forgotten you both. But how could I forget my hands? Because of your usefulness to me and to my people and to the Latu was not a small thing. Can I forget my own hands? Some 20 years after Tawhahau had learned to read and write, in September 1850, when the King had placed his son Vuna in the native training institution in Inaugural, the forerunner to Tupou College, he wrote to his young son, emphasising the importance of education and of his commitment to advancing learning. This is what he said: I cease not to plead for you, my son, before the Lord, that he would make you wise in those things for which you have been sent to the institution in Inaugural. I urge you, my son, to attend greatly to the work for which you are there. The business which devolves upon you there is great, weighty, and difficult. But it is a work which in excellence surpasses all the occupations on earth. What a magnificent statement. The King's requests and the coming of Moulton. The genius of Tupou I was that he kept the vision of the prophet Hosea's words at the forefront of his mind. At a quarterly meeting of the church in Inaugural in 1858, he urged that a missionary be engaged to work full-time for higher education. This was a new thing. There were some teachers previously. Tucker, Mrs. Tucker that were mentioned, Francis Wilson, Richard Amos. But the King wanted something more. What he wanted would have far-reaching effects. His demand for a missionary schoolmaster dedicated exclusively to the work of higher education would challenge the thinking of the missionaries in Tonga and the heads of the church in Sydney and in London. When no action was forthcoming from the church, the King said, if the church cannot provide a missionary to run the institution, then the government must find one not a missionary to do this work. Stephen Raybone, the Secretary of the Missionary Committee in Sydney by that time, and a former missionary to Tonga, as I mentioned, informed the London Committee of the King's veiled threat, really, and asked, who can say what sort of man they may get? A wrong man in charge of the native school could do incalculable mischief. The Sydney Wesleyans soon resolved the issue. News of James Egan Moulton's successes at the Wesleyan Collegiate Institution, which was what Newington was first called, had reached Tonga and the King. Moulton's skill and enthusiasm at Newington had become known and appreciated, and quite noteworthy. They spoke of Moulton, who at that stage, one so young, only 22 years of age. And as Moulton reflected on it afterwards, towards the end of his life, he said that he had come to Tonga at the express invitation of the old king to take charge of the higher education of the king's people. Tupou's appeal in asking specifically for the Newington headmaster was a remarkably bold request. And the opinion of the Wesleyan leadership in Sydney was initially not sympathetic. As Raybone wrote to the missionaries back here in Tonga, as for your laying hands on Mr. Moulton for your institution, that is not likely. In the opinion of many, he is indispensable, and much will be said and done to keep him here at Newington. Furthermore, Moulton had from the beginning been chosen for mission work in Fiji. If he was to leave Newington, then Fiji would be his destination. Circumstances changed, however, in two important ways. The King's letter put considerable pressure on the missionary committee in Sydney, and a young missionary candidate, Isaac Rooney, offered to go to Fiji in Moulton's place. The committee acted swiftly and appointed Rooney to Fiji and Moulton to Tonga. Tupou's genius was that he did not give up on his vision, and he kept up pressure until he secured the kind of teacher that he wanted. Without that determination, that single-mindedness, there would have been no Moulton and no Tupou College as we know it today. With Moulton, however, there was to be a new thing in the land, the dawning of a new era. Devita Tonga Moimoi, working with Moulton, 1866. A precious diamond was how Moulton described one of the students in the first classes he taught. In the classroom, he had formed a bond with one promising student in particular, his name Devita Tonga Moimoi. With an imperfect grasp of the language in these early stages, Moulton would teach Devita as best he could, until he saw light dawn on his pupil's face, and then Devita Tonga, the pupil, that precious diamond, would become the tutor and teach the rest of the class. In this awkward manner, Moulton's teaching, Devita Tonga and Devita Tonga teaching the rest of the class, the syllabus began to take shape and a new day was beginning to dawn. Within less than a decade, Moulton, with Devita Tonga's help, brought a groundbreaking element into college life. He began publishing in the college magazine a considerable body of ancient Tongan culture and tradition. And during 1875-76, age-old poems, ran as a series and commencing in 1881, Myths and Legends of Tonga, the Chronicles of Tonga. And with this project, the college recovered what had long been neglected or regarded as belonging to an era long past. The genius was that Moulton and Devita Tonga Mohinoa had come together in a radical way. Nothing like the Chronicles had been published before, except perhaps for some material contained in Will Mariner's Tonga Islands, published in 1817. Now, in the 1870s and 80s, the series of articles in the college magazine recovered ancient stories, poems and songs, bringing a significant amount of Tongan traditional cultural material to the awareness of his students. There was also something else that was groundbreaking about the publication of the Chronicles. Devita Tonga was responsible for preparing the series, and his name appeared as the author, thus becoming the first Tongan to be recognised as an author and published. And his writings were a stepping off point for other later writers. McKern writing about archaeology, Gifford writing Tongan society, Collicott, Tales and Poems of Tonga. They all credited Dr. Moulton and Devita Tonga articles in their list of sources. On his death in 1895, aged around 78 years, a memorial service in Australia, several of course were conducted, but one was conducted in Bathurst in New South Wales. And the preacher used some notes given to him by Moulton, and he spoke of Devita Tonga's outstanding qualities. He said he could play the harmonium and on occasion composed suitable tunes for special services to be sung by the college students. One such tune sung in Zion Church was characterised by the Reverend Stevenson, a missionary in Tonga from 1858 to 1870, as the finest thing he had ever heard during his residence in Tonga. The last words of the tribute to Devita Tonga Mohinoa came from the depths of Moulton's heart. And this is what he said. Has he not been my son, my blameless, noble, matchless son, the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power? Tupou, Moulton, and the patriotic hymn. The genius of Moulton is nowhere more evident than in the hundreds of hymns he translated or composed and offered to the college and the church. His son Egan remarked, and many would agree with him, that in his hymns the Tongan church became possessed of a rich legacy. During his early weeks, Moulton had introduced Tongans to his great passion for music. In his journal, he noted that at a service of worship, he played his harmonium, and the congregation heard for the first time in a Tongan church Handel's immutable grand Hallelujah chorus, 1866. Great things were to follow Moulton's love of music, and the Tongans' love of music shown in their traditional songs and dances. And this love of music combined to create a new musical tradition and a whole range of hymns and other sacred music which became an integral part of Tupou College life. James Egan Moulton said that many hymns were written on themes suggested by the environment of the hour. And there is one hymn that has a strong national emphasis and which has become a kind of second national anthem, sung particularly on days when history and heritage are on people's minds. And the Jubilee, the 50-year celebration in 1876 of the founding of the Wesleyan Church, I believe was the theme, the environment of the hour. And that hymn is 391. That hymn shows, I believe, the coming together of the genius of Tupou I, the words of the King's speech at the Jubilee, and the genius of Moulton, creating a stirring hymn to express the King's patriotic thoughts and feelings. When the Wesleyan Church Jubilee was being celebrated in 1876, colonial powers were at their height. Many islands were annexed to colonial powers. Fiji was annexed to Britain in 1875, and in that environment of colonial activity, it is not surprising that King George's long-standing view of Tongan sovereignty would be made clear. At a Jubilee speech, he said these words: "There are many things which ought to cause us rejoicing today. Tonga is still owned by Tongans and governed by Tongans. We are not subject to any other land. Remember how Fiji is forever lost to the Fijians, annexed the year before the Jubilee. And in all probability, Samoa too. Other groups of islands have been fired upon by various men of war. But during the past 50 years, Tonga never was." For some 25 years previously, the King had expressed a similar view. In 1850, 25 years before that speech at the Jubilee, the King said this: "I verily wish to be a friend of Britain, in friendly alliance with all fellowship, but it is not my mind, nor the mind of my people, that we should be subject to any other people or kingdom in this world, but it is our mind to sit down, that is, to remain an independent nation." And so on this highly patriotic Jubilee Day, we see how strongly he felt about his country and his people. He said this: "I hardly feel able to express my feelings today. I feel my heart burning within me with joy when I think what Tonga has accomplished since Mr. Thomas came. And I think that if the leaves of the trees of Tonga and the soil of Tonga had mouths, they would shout forth their thanks to God for what he has done for Tonga." And so in that highly charged situation, Moulton wrote a hymn about a little land in the midst of the ocean, about a little land that received the gospel from missionaries, about a little land that was able to withstand colonialism, even in the face of Fiji and Tahiti losing their independence. A little land that put together God and Tonga. A little land in the face of it all that remained. So that hymn was written. The hymn was first printed in the College magazine in 1881 and later published in the Tupou College hymn book, The 100 Hymns of 1883. The speech of the King and the hymn seem to be another example of the genius of Tupou I, the orator and nationalist, and the genius of Moulton, the college principal and hymn writer, coming together to create a lasting treasure for the school, the church and the nation. Having heard the background to that hymn, here a translation of it. There is a small island in the ocean who did not know God and had no goodness whatever. Hallelujah. Now she is blessed. To the islands the gospel came, brought by the missionaries. The islands listened to the message of the Bible, and the chiefs with their king were converted. A testing time came to this part of the ocean. Foreign countries came, and they put the people of the islands to the test. And there were many islands that were lost. Though Tahiti took to religion, this did not save her at all. Fiji did the same, but it did not save her either. Only Tonga still remains. The prophet says the olive tree has two branches, government and church, in order to make a nation strong. And we are blessed in having a powerful sovereign. The last verse, Son of Tonga, stand up and work. Make use of your good fortune. Always pray to God to support the faith and to protect Tupou, the king. We will have a break at this point in that patriotic song, and we're going to sing it shortly. And I make the observation, and I didn't know it when I wrote this lecture, I make the observation that the first line of the last verse of this hymn is the theme for Tupou College for 2018. Son of Tonga, stand up and work.